Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Queerly Biz. I'm Kerry King and today we have...
Hi, I'm Jem.
Jem.
Hi.
So we have Jem. So thank you so much for coming in to join us. Very excited. Now, Jem and I have only met recently, but we are definitely one of those types of people who just met and went, oh my God, you're so cool. Oh, this is brilliant. We need to hang out more. But this is only the second time we've actually had a chance to hang out and we have microphones.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of throw you in at the deep end.
Ooh.
And yes, let's see. Now, do we have a label? Do you have a box for yourself?
Oh man, yeah. I suppose I've become quite staunchly non-binary.
Non-binary, excellent.
Which is funny, right? It's a paradox because it's I feel so very clearly that I am not any one thing, but that's where I'm happy. I suppose.
That's wonderful. We haven't had anyone non-binary on yet, so you're the first of many. I'm sure there'll be many, and you can create the yellow brick road for them to follow.
Okay.
So, then talking of Dorothy, there's campness all around us. I do love Norwich.
Yeah, man, isn't it good? It's like the second most non-binary place in the country.
Is it? Is it actually?
Yeah, the census has shown.
That's really cool.
Well, according to, self-selecting, non-binary people, who knows how many non-binary people there are lurking in Hull. But yeah, no, Norwich is very significantly
I love that.
non-binary.
So are you Norfolk born and bred?
No, I grew up in South London.
Oh, okay.
In Croydon.
In Croydon, okay.
Yeah, so I went to school in Croydon and lived in Croydon as a young adult as well. I moved here 4 years ago with a partner
you've
of
only
mine.
been here for 4 years?
Yeah.
You're a newbie.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. Welcome, newbie.
Thanks. Have you always lived here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm born and bred. I went away for 1 year to Florida and came back.
Florida?
Well, that's just because my dad was starting a business there.
Okay.
And he said, instead of leaving the family, I suppose I could take them with me to, the state of sunshine and have a permanent holiday for a year. So I just got quite fat while I was over there and then came back.
As you do when you go to Florida.
Yes, that can happen.
Yeah.
All that lying around and doing nothing.
Yeah, and the huge plates of food that they give
There's
you.
a lot of huge plates of food, and I myself became huge and plateful.
Easily done.
So yes, I'm Norfolk born and bred, but you are not. So Croydon as a growing up place. Now I think of London as very diverse and I mean I don't know if I would use the word welcoming. I don't go to London very often, and when I do, generally I feel quite unwelcome because it's not like Norwich. So in Norwich, when you go into a shop, someone will hold the door open for you.
Sure.
And when that happens in London, they're like, oh, I have to talk to someone. I will not talk to them. I must shut the door. Go. Did you find that growing up, or was it a community for you?
Yeah, no, it was very isolated, I think, and individualistic. I was also, my parents lived in kind of like a leafy suburb near Croydon. I was going to school in Croydon and going to Croydon, spending all my time there. But really, when I was at home, it was not a kind of a place where you would hang out with other people in the street or even talk to other people. So it was very much, everyone had their sort of garrison that they lived in that kind of like classic suburban way. And then, Croydon was, obviously like sort of full of people. I mean, there was this idea that Croydon was dangerous. I never had any trouble,
Well, that's good. And you are still here. You are still in one piece.
I'm still here, yes.
Excellent. You got to Norfolk in one piece. When you were growing up, at what point did you realise that you might be part of the LGBTQ community?
When I was like 10, I just started seeing, like boy bands on TV and stuff. And it's interesting, I was just talking about this with somebody else actually, this kind of idea of like, because it's so funny, you see boy bands on television, or boy bands, sort of cute boy bands or act or sort of cultural instances like that, where it's like the whole symbology around it is like highly sexualized.
Yes.
So it's like, even though they're it's regardless of the gender, you're having these kind of like sexualized images projected at you as a young child, and you're sort of helpless to kind of like do anything with it. But I had this kind of very visceral kind of reaction to it because my dad had been sort of very openly homophobic my whole life, and so I'd internalized this idea of like, oh well, actually to be gay is like this sort of weird, sort of disgusting, kind of sick thing. And so I had this kind of like horrible kind of self-hatred brewing in me for years and years and years after that point.
Bugger. So as far as coming out to your parents, to say that you were part of the community in some way or another. Yeah. How did that go?
It's interesting that you say part of the community because, you know, at that point it felt like my membership in that particular club was to resign me to a deeply sad and lonely life, right? It felt as though there was this kind of path that they'd followed, which was this kind of like happy family, nuclear family kind of thing. You make friends with other people of the same gender and their partners, and then you all have these kind of things. You all have your kids together, and you all grow up, and you have this kind of like community that you build. And then if you're gay, you're this weird sort of vestigial offshoot that has no kind of, has no ability to build that kind of like idea, that sense of community, that normal sense of community. So yeah, how did I come out? My mum found out. She was very mad. My mum found out because, and this is going to age me, my MySpace page said that I was bi at the time. I think.
Okay.
And she found that, she saw that, and she was really mad at me about it. I think she was just very, I don't know, I don't really understand where she was coming from with that, I think she was mad that I hadn't told her. She was mad that I was getting away from her because I was a teenager and that, she was...
you were becoming your own person.
She was fearful of the fact that I was, becoming my own person.
And perhaps that wasn't something she recognised.
She was worried. She was scared for me. Yeah, she was worried for me and she was scared for me.
So something I said to you on the phone this morning and also just outside, and I want to say it again just because I feel it's so relevant and it hasn't come up yet in the other podcasts, is that I feel that most of discrimination is through fear and people not understanding and being worried. And if they don't understand it, then they don't like it. And they get to the point where they don't want to understand it and they don't want to like it. And then it almost becomes a battle that they want to work against you. Whereas I think there's a lot of other parts of society that doesn't happen. But with the LGBTQ community, it's really strong. And there's a lot of people who have a real strong reaction to somebody being gay or non-binary or trans. And it's so unfair because it can be such a physical reaction and such a strong reaction. And I mean, I find it really kind of ironic that the queer community, I find, are the most welcoming people and the most wonderful community and caring and kind and just lovely. And yet they are treated so poorly by people, and they are some of the most marginalised people I find in our society, and it just seems so unfair. Just unfair again.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that it comes from a place of fear, because I think it taps into people's sort of vestigial, haedial understanding of their own sexuality, which often is so murky, right? Even sort of heterosexual people have, deep misunderstanding about their own sexuality and what pleases them, or they have a complex relationship with fear and guilt and power and control, and all these things get tied into this thing that they don't really understand even within themselves. And so when they encounter somebody who's doing that in a different way or is comfortable with it, they can feel usurped, or they can feel embarrassed or bad about themselves, which then manifests in this kind of anger or frustration in a very kind of primal way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I want to focus more on your experience during this podcast, but I just want to tell a story of something that happened to me yesterday. And I have to say, if it hadn't happened to me, I would not have believed it. And even when it was happening to me, I didn't believe it. So somebody rang me. I just spotted it was a London number, came up on my phone. I answered the phone and they'd said something about utility bills at my shop. I used to have Norfolk's only Pride shop, Pride and Seek. And I'd sort of said to them, look, I don't have the shop anymore, so it's not relevant to me. And the guy had said, oh, can I just clarify, your business is called Pride and Seek? And I said, yes. And he said, Pride as in... And I said, Pride as in gay people. And he said, you're not one of those. Oh, you seem like such a nice lady. You need to get away from them. It's a disease.
In 2024?
A disease?
Oh, my God.
I was horrified. And I said... excuse me? I said, sorry, can you just say what you said again? And he said, oh, I just said, have a nice day, ma'am.
Oh my God, wow.
And so I've recorded the phone number.
Oh my God.
I've tried to work back to which company it came from, because that's ridiculous. I was just horrified, and I said, I just can't believe he just said that to me. That's unreal, and this can't keep happening. I mean, I I cannot believe it happened, but it was in my ear and it did happen.
Yeah.
So actually what I've done is I've reported it to the police as a hate crime.
Fair enough.
Because the other thing is, if I'd have been in a worse place mentally myself,
Sure,
about my identity and how I felt about myself, that could have been truly disastrous for me.
yeah, right. I was on the way to on Sunday, so a couple of days ago, I was on the way to a performance. I was going to play a song at an acoustic night at Merchant's House. Shout out Merchant's House. And they're always a very welcoming space, right? Merchant's House is great.
Yeah.
Ugh. And I was on the way down there. I was walking through Tombland, and these 4 boys on bikes were like cycling by, and one of them spotted me and was like, "Oh, what the fuck is that?" And then as they cycled away, like turned around to look at me and was like, "Go home, you fucking stupid piece of shit, and slit your fucking wrists."
Oh my God.
I know.
What?
I know. All I could
is
do
wrong
was sort of
with
stand there and just go, like, what?
That's
What can you do?
unreal.
What can you do?
And that, oh God.
Isn't that wild?
That's
what
insane.
compels somebody?
And I remember saying last time, babies aren't born homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic, racist. At some point, somebody has to go in and go, "Oh, I'm going to make you like me. I'm going to influence you, and it's going to be your home environment or your work environment, your school environment that influences you to be this way." What kind of horrible life must they have to think it's a great idea to hate everyone? I don't get it. I mean, I genuinely love a lot of people, and I am the happiest I've been for a long time.
I love everyone, man. I love everyone. I even love that guy.
What, the arsehole guy?
Yeah, of course. You know, if you wanted to work through that, I would put the time in. You know,
Yes.
I would do that for him.
So I was trying to actually find the company that rang me so that I could ring them and say, "Would you like my training? Because I think you need it. I think your employees really need it."
Yeah, sure.
Because clearly they need to be educated by Rainbow Assured. But let's move on to you. Now, I understand that your story is difficult,
Yeah, it's complicated.
I'm going to use the word harrowing.
Sure.
Tell us as much as you're comfortable with. I don't want to push you into boundaries that you're not comfortable in.
Okay.
Only tell us what you're comfortable with. But before you start, I just want to say I absolutely admire you for being able to tell any of your story, and thank you for coming on as well, because I know that a lot of people have had it a lot harder than me, and I really appreciate the courage it takes to just come out and say it.
Thanks.
And I think you're fucking awesome.
Thanks, man. Well, look, I'll start by saying, like, what I do is I run a space now that is a DIY art space, like a specifically queer DIY art space.
And the name is amazing.
Ambition's Graveyard.
Love that.
Because Norwich is a graveyard of ambition. People call it that. So the reason I do this, and the reason I do this independently, is because I find it incredibly difficult to work with groups and ensembles. I've been kind of ostracized from like professional community circles because my story is difficult and it's complicated and people struggle to grapple with it, and I think oftentimes it's more effort than people want to put in to deal with that. And the situation is that, you know, when I was young, I was a musician, I was an artist, and I was an early adopter of YouTube. I was on YouTube, and I was making videos alongside other people who were sort of developing this kind of like understanding of the platform. We were all kind of like the first people to develop, like, you know, I remember we would have conversations, like 2009, we would have conversations about things like jump cuts. Like, what's the grammar of a jump cut?
I don't know what that means.
How do we, when you've got the shot is the same, but you move around in the shot, right?
Okay.
Which is in film editing, it's a total no-no.
Right.
Because it very clearly, it obviously lets the viewer know that there has been a cut, right? Right. But in vlogging, it's now part and parcel of everyday communication.
Producer Cal is nodding knowledgeably.
But we were the one, you know, in those days, those early days of YouTube, we were the ones having those conversations about, like, what is a jump cut cool? is it okay to do? And that was a really exciting time. We were developing the grammar of this new mode of communication. And it felt really exciting. It felt like we were on the cusp of like developing a new kind of independent form of media. And so we would have these gatherings, we would get together and we would kind of like talk about the videos that we were making. And I was making music. And at one point I got sort of globally, it used to be YouTube had like a front page. It's like a global front page. So if you were on the front page, if you were a featured video, you were featured for everybody. So I had that and then suddenly, you know, 500,000 views back then was not to be sniffed at. Now it's sort of kind of small fry, really, but for some people. But like,
look, my singing video, I think my most popular one has had like 582 views. So 500,000 for me is still amazing.
I try so hard now to be like, to remind myself that like when you get, you know, 500 views, 100 views on a video, it's like that's 100 people who've like sat down and taken the time. Like that's huge, you know. Anyway, so I was doing this thing, making YouTube videos, and it just was a very confused young person, right? I was in relationship. I was coming to terms with my sexuality in kind of a big way. I was in relationships with much older men all the time. You know, I was being, you know, these, you know, people would find me on YouTube, this sort of cute, smart, you know, thoughtful. Oh God, they would perceive me to be this cute, smart, thoughtful person. And they would want to talk to me and they would engage me. And obviously I not knowing what was going on, you would sort of, oh yeah, hi, what's going on? So I suddenly was in these circles, all these kind of old men who were interested in me and talking to me. And that was my kind of environment. I got into some relationships that were really bad for me, you know, very controlling and very, you know, I got sort of cut off from all my friends. And then, yeah, it kind of, the fame thing escalated. And YouTube blew up in the way that it did, right? And became this kind of global phenomenon, which nobody thought necessarily it would at the time, right?
Yeah.
But it started to become this thing, and I grew increasingly scared and nervous because I was, you know, a kid and had a lot of self-doubt and a lot of anxiety around it. So I would, you know, post things, but they maybe wouldn't do so well, or people wouldn't really understand it, and I was trying to branch out as a musician as well and kind of do things that I wanted to be working with people where there was a level of integrity to what we were doing. But people didn't take me seriously because I was this YouTuber and it was this sort of online thing that didn't have any credibility to it. So I was making music and I was trying to figure that out. And then I ended up getting into a relationship sort of right after a sort of a really terrible breakup with somebody who was very emotionally abusive to me and really kind of like cut me off from everybody who I knew. I got into this relationship with somebody who was younger than me. You know, they were 16, I was 21. Just, you know, nowadays, of course, I would be like, absolutely don't let anybody do that. But we were talking, we were sharing our experiences and we'd been through similar things and we ended up just, you know, growing very close. And so, you know, a few years later, as I was kind of already thinking about leaving the YouTube space, there was a whole slew of cancellations, really kind of a big wave of cancellations that came out around all these kind of things. And my partner from that time, said they've been really unhappy in the relationship, which I already knew, you know, it was completely true, that it had been a horrible time for both of us.
Were you unhappy as well? Did you just kind of either hide it better or just deal with it differently?
No, I didn't hide it. That's the thing. No. We were both kind of like, but it became codependent precisely because we were both, you know, depressed. And so we had this other person to rely on who could like we were just sort of pouring our kind of like misery out and sort of wallowing in it, you know, in the way that you can.
Yeah.
When you're young and it sort of seems romantic to be so miserable. And we were on Tumblr and we were aestheticizing it relentlessly and it was all very cool and miserable. You know, we really were sort of wallowing in it.
It's a different kind of space when you're younger. They're definitely the type of relationships you have when you're younger that are so intense and and you behave a certain way because that's all you know. You haven't had that kind of experience in relationships yet, and then you get older and go, oh, do you know, I can't be bothered with all that stuff. It's so dramatic. It's so that's the one thing I don't want is all this drama.
Yeah.
But while you're in that space, and as much as people say, you know, adults might say to you, oh, you're just going to have to grow up a bit.
Yeah.
You don't have that emotional maturity. You don't have that option because you don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
And it only really comes with age. I mean, certainly there are some people who are kind of like an old soul and in their own body and seem to be more mature from an early age, but those are definitely a rarity. Especially when it comes to relationships.
Well, I think people sometimes can be good at pretending to be mature. But I don't think there's any, I think nobody has it figured out, right?
No,
I don't
not
have
at
it
all.
figured out now. So,
Now, how old are you now? May I
I'm
ask?
35.
Oh, such a baby. But then I look at Cal, and Cal is even more of a baby. Cal's in his 20s. I know, right? I'm getting to the point I can't even remember what that's like.
I don't know what that reaction is. People are in their 20s all the time. I don't know. I was in my 20s for 10 whole years.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that feels like a really long time ago for me. But I'm only 7 years older than you, so it's really not that long. But
I feel like I'm having a kind of a second go at it, really, because my 20s was dominated by this kind of thing coming out, and then everybody, oh my God, everybody turned against me, like all my friends, everybody nobody knew what to do. Like I find it very hard to blame anybody for it, because it was like everybody it was like part of this whole thing, and it was all kind of the whole community was ripping itself apart. I became this kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say scapegoat, but like it seemed
kind
like
of figurehead of
kind of a figurehead of something that was very kind of dark and nefarious.
Yeah.
I really didn't know what to do with it, and I spent a lot of years in the wilderness, just kind of like trying to piece my life back together and figure out how I was going to survive and what I was going to do. I was coming to terms with my gender identity, all this kind of stuff, and it was really, really difficult. So in my 20s, I basically kind of just like...
Did you kind of jump from relationship to relationship, or did this one kind of pan you out and you then had to kind of pick yourself up for a while?
I had a really good, at the time it all happened, I had a really good relationship with somebody who was very supportive and really cared for me.
That's awesome.
But then, after that, I went through a long period of not really dating anybody, not really seeing anybody. It was complicated. I had to figure it out. I had to really kind of break myself down and go, right, well, what happened here? How did I let it get to this state? Because, like, long story short, I've really hurt somebody, right? Who's been really hurt. Somebody I loved has been really hurt by my actions. And no one else can... I can't absolve myself of responsibility for that, right? Like, no matter what my intentions were, it happened.
It happened,
So I have to break it all the way down and start again and figure out, how do I interact with people? What do I expect from a relationship? What do I need from love? What does that mean for me? And how, if there's anything in there that is, that I'm asking for that's unreasonable, how do I wind that back and find that from within myself? Because I had no self-respect. I had no, I was drawing it all from an audience, right? Seeking it from an online audience, because I had no self-love. I had no self-dignity, self-respect.
Do you have self-love now?
Yeah, I've got a few. I've got a little in the tank, but it gets depleted.
Yeah, I can imagine. But the other thing is that because you work in a creative space and you are obviously a creative person, I think the creatives tend to feel that kind of thing harder. The rejection sensitivity and the impact of people's words. The other thing is, when you're a performer, I feel one of the reasons that I don't openly put myself out there to perform very often, as in my singing, is because I am showing up for criticism. And when it comes to my singing, I don't take criticism well, because I'm so worried about what people are going to say.
Of course.
And I haven't actually had that much negative feedback on my singing, but I'm just so terrified of someone who's going to go, "You're shit." And that hits so hard that I just go, "Oh, I'm just not gonna do it then."
Sure.
Then I never have to hear that I'm shit. But you're opening up a very kind of vulnerable side of yourself when you're a creative, and when you're doing something that means so much to you, and then going, "Here, I'm gonna perform in front of you, and you can clap, or you can boo, or you can walk out halfway through and go, 'This is rubbish,'" and it's such a vulnerable feeling. And I feel like when you're LGBTQ, we kind of have that as well, because I'm walking down the street with my wife. I'm very aware that I'm potentially opening myself up to criticism, to critique, and to other people's opinions. And although I'm not putting myself on a stage, I am putting myself out in public life and saying, "This is me, this is my life, and this is what I'm comfortable with. I don't really care if you accept it or not." But ultimately, if somebody were to stand there and shout at me, I would feel quite badly affected by that.
So that's interesting. I would like to offer an alternative viewpoint on the same thing, which is that actually my queerness allows me to be kind of bulletproof in terms of criticism.
Really?
Because, if someone says, well, I don't like that, I can just go, well, you just don't understand. Yeah, I'm operating in a different framework to you.
Oh, I love that.
So the thing that you don't like about it, that's an aesthetic subjective choice that you're making. You don't like it because it doesn't appeal to you. But I've got my own thing going on. It doesn't really matter to me.
We should have met earlier. That's very cool. I may have to take that on. In fact, I also very much feel that you meet when you meet for a reason, and you meet people when you're ready to meet them and when you're ready to gain the most from your meeting. And I think that if I'd met producer Cal earlier on, we wouldn't perhaps have had the great relationship that we have, because I wouldn't have been in a place where we could have actually helped each other.
Sure.
When we met, perhaps that wouldn't have been the right time, because now I'm at a point where I'm really comfortable with my queerness and championing the people of our community. And I didn't know as much before. I don't know that I was quite as fearful or discriminatory as I now know other people are, but I don't think I had the understanding that would have allowed me to kind of fully embrace you and go, oh my God, you're so awesome, I have to spend time with you. So I do think it's certainly, there's an element of we meet when we're supposed to. So I mean, I guess you must have had relationships or people come about in your life when you've been at a point where you're kind of ready to.
Well, the big thing actually on that topic was the cancellation, really. It's like I look back on it now and I'm like, thank God there was an intervention of some kind, because I was hurting the people around me. It was a problem. It was like I was so deeply needy for, love, affection from outside sources that it was draining the people around me. And it was there was no way I could ever have built a career on the back of that. It only would have gotten worse.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful. I mean, you have to be, right? But I am grateful for what it taught me, and for the fact that it actually made me sit down and go, right, I need to actually get back to the foundations of why I'm doing what I'm doing and rebuild it from a more stable place.
See, that's incredible in itself, because there's so many people who are not able to have retrospection and look at themselves and go, okay, this is a me problem. I need to work out what it is and what I can do about it. There's so many people who would go, well, it's a you problem, and that's a you problem, and that's a you problem. And I do find that I've had somebody in my life who came about and everyone had kind of rejected them, and they had all these stories about how terrible life was and how everyone had rejected them. And now I look at them and go, well, perhaps you should have gone, do you know what? It's happened that many times that maybe it's me.
Yeah.
But this person has now moved on out of my life, I'm quite glad to say, and is no longer in my periphery. And I'm wondering at what point they do turn around and go, oh, this just keeps happening. Yeah. Maybe it's me. And it's hard to say I'm the problem. I have a character flaw. I have bad points. I have imperfections. I'm going to have to do something about this. And I think it's really courageous and brave to say, right, this is me. This is a me thing. Something I've done has hurt someone. I don't want to be that person that hurts people. So I'm going to actively do something about it, and I'm going to make shit better.
I see that as my role as an artist. So I don't think I would be capable of performing the role of artist with any integrity if I knew I was lying to myself in some way. The excavation of myself.
Oh, I like that.
Through my work.
Can that be an album title?
The excavation of myself. Yeah.
That's the podcast.
That's the podcast. That's the episode title.
Excellent. I love that.
Just through the work that I make, through the music that I write, through the writing that I do, it has to be brutally honest. Because if I'm hiding anything, if I'm holding anything back, then what's the point? Yeah. Why am I even doing it? So I want to go through that process, and I want to lay bare that process and document the process, right? An artist is a captain keeping a log at sea.
You're so cool. You're just effortlessly cool.
Oh, stop.
So producer Cal's girlfriend, Beth, is also someone who is effortlessly cool. And you're looking at me with some surprise.
I think it's just artists.
Yeah, I guess so. I just find her so just adorable. She's just such an awesome person that I kind of want to go, I want to spend more time with you. You're so cool. and those sort of people should be so cherished in life. And ultimately, those seem to be the people who are damaged the most. And maybe it's the fact that they are damaged that you then go, oh, let me hug you, please.
Yeah.
Let me comfort you.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I just want to go, oh my God, you don't deserve all of this shit. You shouldn't have had to have gone through all that to find where you are now. I do think our experiences take us to where we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But also, and I also think that some of the things that I've gone through, I hope will lead me to a place where I'm then able to help people who've been through similar things.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have to have gone through them in the first place because they were pretty fucking unpleasant.
Sure. But you learn so much from those experiences. You do learn so much. It's grit. It's grit,
and it's determination.
And queer people have it in spades. I got to say, there's something about that. It's like, there's something about that experience. And I think that's why communities build around, trans people, around queer people. It's like they've had a shared experience and they've come out the other side and they can look at each other and they can go, I see you.
I see you.
I see you.
Yeah.
And we've been through something together.
Yeah.
And it's kind of trauma bonding. Which is not healthy necessarily, but I think there is something huge. I think there's something deeply spiritual to it. There's something foundational there.
Awesome and super cool. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh,
we are getting to the point where we have to wrap up.
No,
I know it's been such a short
Surely we're not even at the halfway
right,
point.
Well, I'll just have to get you back another time, and another time, and another time.
Yeah,
You'll
cool.
be one of my favourite podcast people.
I'd love to keep talking with you. Absolutely,
that would be brilliant. So I wanted to just bring up briefly that I realised that I've called people a couple of times. I've called them normies because I think it's a nice way to say people who aren't me. Normal people, maybe the cishet.
People who've never had to question their position in society, perhaps. People who haven't had that psychic break of going, oh, the person I am doesn't fit in the situation that I'm meant to be in.
Yes,
it's a kind of privilege.
Those are the normies. Well, then somebody said to me yesterday, oh, if you've got any queries, and I went, ooh, queries. I like that. So we could have normies and queries. Mm-hmm.
Let's, hopefully as a step on the path towards ultimately doing away with any kind of categorization whatsoever.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jem. My name's Kerry King, and making your workplace a safe space. We're here for Queerly Biz. Catch you again soon.